Brands are always looking for ways to improve the customer journey and customer experience, and ultimately enhance customer satisfaction and, of course, brand loyalty. And both of you are building platforms that do this. Nikola at PolyAI and Ben at Relative Insight, from an analytics perspective, Ben, and from an automation perspective, Nikola. But Ben, I want to start with you. Analytics is just such a big part of this equation. Where do you start?
What we tend to focus on is the question why. Why is something happening? And this is why we focus on language analytics. How people talk tells you why they do things. So sales go up, sales go down. Customer satisfaction is up, satisfaction is down. These metrics, the movement of these metrics are interesting. They tell you what. But why is answered by language analytics. Customers will tell you. It's all out there in the language data that most companies are sat on. It's the differences in language that matter. What you say in isolation seldom matters. What matters is what's different between one set of people and another set of people, or how people talk now compared with how they talked before your ad campaign.
What's an example of how brands can measure that delta and act on it?
Well, it normally comes into two parts. One is strategy and the other is tactics. So a really good example of a tactic would be a big beauty brand that we work with. So they wanted to start selling to a younger audience. And what we did was that we analyzed how did 20-somethings review makeup, how do 50-somethings review makeup. By comparing them, most of it's the same, but the differences are key. 20-year-olds will tend to say they wear makeup. 50-year-olds tend to say they apply makeup.
And so brands need to understand that so they can better target messages. And when it translates to automation, Nikola, you have a platform that's doing a lot to improve the overall customer experience and customer care, for example. How does your platform work?
We help brands put customer service in places where they might not be able to afford to, or where they might not be able to afford to put enough of it in. For instance, some of our largest clients are hospitality companies that can't afford to take all the calls that they're getting. And when they take all these calls, we help them increase the numbers of reservations by up to 10%. Or if you think about large telcos, they get more and more calls these days because people add more smart gadgets into their homes and they call about not being able to connect them. So if you're able to help them take all those calls, you're doing wonders for the lifetime value of that customer. And really, with the improvement in tech, we're able to put the best of customer service into their customer service estates.
How do you pick where you can automate a customer workflow and where you need to have that human oversight?
You automate where you're basically able to have a very smooth experience without having to hand off. And if you're not able to do a great job, you hand off quickly, and that's where the call center comes back in. So it's like a second level of IVR, but the business case works out to be a lot better.
Are we seeing then a trend of more and more automation, or do you always think there's going to be that small percentage that just need that human oversight?
We're seeing a huge increase in automation, and there's always going to be a human element, simply because your highest value customers might really want that human touch, or because the technology is always going to have that small percentage of cases where the ROI on automation is just not there.
Well, speaking of ROI, so both of you ultimately are having to justify to your customers your price and how you engage with them. How do you think about presenting ROI?
In the tactical scenario I described earlier, where you're changing the language of ads, we've seen ads increase performance by 70%. By understanding how one audience talks compared to another audience, you know how to focus the ad. But then we also see just day-to-day ROI benefits in people who are struggling to analyze language data. They've got all this language data. Data isn't a problem. Right? There's more than enough data in the world.
And it's proliferating.
Yeah, and people don't really want more. They just need to analyze what they've got better. So what we see is people use us to do two things. One is analyze the data they've already got, orders of magnitude quicker. But the other thing they see is that they get to reuse this data in new strategic ways. I mean, for every million words that get uploaded into the Relative Insight platform, customers will do 5 million words of analysis. So what that means is they're uploading it, but then they're splitting it by time, comparing by time, or by age group, or by geography.
Look, for us, it's a lot simpler, right? If you put the best possible customer service with the most trained agent that's seen more data than any of your human agents will, you're cutting costs, especially for those businesses that have high peaks and troughs, and then they get to put in infinite quasi-human resource in places where they didn't have to have almost any resource at all before. Or it's large traditional businesses where we're just cutting 20, 30, 40% of OpEx of a really large call center.